When I was in my early 20s, I had this obsession with extreme hiking. Not the Instagram-worthy trail stuff, but the real deal. Remote mountains, harsh conditions, the kind of places where one wrong move could end everything. My Russian friend Mikhail shared this obsession, which is how I ended up hearing about the Dyatlov Pass Incident from someone who actually lived near those mountains. We were planning a winter expedition to the Urals, and Mikhail's grandfather, Yuri, overheard us discussing routes. The old man went pale when we mentioned Kolatsyakhl, the dead mountain. That's when he told us what he saw back in February 1959, when he was part of the search team that found those 9 hikers. Yuri had been a young forest ranger then, familiar with every trail in those mountains. When Igor Dyatlov's group didn't return on schedule, he volunteered to help search. What they found still gave him nightmares 60 years later. The tent was the first thing they discovered, halfway up the slope of Kolatsyakhl. But it wasn't just damaged, it had been slashed open from the inside, like the occupants had desperately cut their way out in pure panic. Knives were still there, abandoned. Whatever made them flee, they didn't even take time to grab their boots or coats. In minus 30 degrees Celsius. The footprints leading away from the tent told a bizarre story. 9 sets of prints, some barefoot, some in socks, walking, not running, in a line down the slope, like they were being herded. The prints went on for about 500 meters before disappearing. They found the first 2 bodies near a cedar tree, almost naked, with evidence they'd tried to start a fire. The tree had branches broken up to 5 meters high, like they'd climbed it frantically looking for something, or hiding from something. 3 more bodies were found scattered between the tree and the tent, frozen in positions suggesting they'd been trying to return. But the last 4 bodies weren't found until May, buried under 4 meters of snow in a ravine. That's when things got truly disturbing. Yuri's voice dropped to a whisper when he described what they found. One had her eyes missing, not decomposed, but surgically removed. Another's tongue was gone. The trauma on their bodies was unlike anything from an avalanche. Massive internal injuries with no external wounds, like they'd been subjected to extreme pressure from inside. One investigator compared it to a car crash, but there were no external marks. The government investigators arrived within days and immediately classified everything. Yuri and the other searchers were made to sign documents, threatened with prison if they ever spoke about certain details. The area was closed to civilians for 3 years. But here's what really haunted Yuri, the detail that never made it into any report. When they found that tent, there were other tracks around it, not human tracks. They were large, maybe 3 times the size of a human foot, with what looked like claw marks. The officials made them destroy all photos of those prints. Yuri grabbed my arm as he finished his story. His grip was surprisingly strong for such an old man. They say it was an avalanche now, trying to close the case again. But avalanches don't remove eyes with surgical precision. Avalanches don't leave radiation on clothing. And avalanches definitely don't make experienced hikers cut their way out of a tent and walk calmly to their deaths. He looked directly at me and Mikhail. That mountain has been cursed long before those 9 died. The indigenous Mansi people have legends about it. They call it the mountain where spirits go to die. They won't hunt there, won't even look at it directly. When we found those bodies, the Mansi guides we'd hired refused to help. They just kept repeating one phrase. The ancient ones were angry. We canceled our Ural expedition after that conversation. But sometimes, late at night, I still think about those 9 hikers. What did they see that made them slash their way out of that tent? What force could cause such specific, brutal injuries? And why did the Soviet government work so hard to bury the truth? Last year, I read that Russian authorities reopened the investigation, settling on a slab avalanche as the cause. But if you look at the original case files that leaked online, you'll see something interesting. Several pages are still missing, the ones that contained witness testimonies about strange orange orbs in the sky that night, and the radiation found on the victims' clothes. The Dyatlov Pass incident remains unsolved, no matter what official reports claim. 9 experienced hikers don't just walk barefoot into a frozen death unless something unimaginable drove them to it. And whatever that something was, it's still out there in those mountains. When I was 12, my family had this tradition of spending Father's Day weekend camping in the Great Smoky Mountains. It wasn't just us. My uncle's family always came too, which meant 6 adults and 8 kids crammed into 3 tents at Spence Field. That June of 1969 started like any other trip, but it ended up being the last time our families ever went camping together. The adults were setting up camp while us kids explored the area. My cousin Dennis was the youngest at 6, but he kept up with us older kids pretty well. He had this red shirt that his mom always made him wear so she could spot him easily. Looking back, that detail still haunts me. After lunch on Father's Day, we decided to play hide and seek near the camp. Dennis was playing with his brother and 2 other kids while I helped my dad with the fire. The game was simple. Dennis and his brother would jump out and scare the other kids from behind some bushes. Just innocent fun. But after one round, Dennis never came back out. His brother emerged from behind the rhododendron bushes laughing, expecting Dennis to follow. But he didn't. At first, we thought he was being extra sneaky, trying to win the game. After 5 minutes, the adults started calling his name. After 10, they were searching the bushes. After 20, pure panic set in. My uncle ran to get help from other campers while my dad and the other adults spread out, screaming Dennis's name until their voices went hoarse. Within hours, the place was swarming with park rangers. By nightfall, there were hundreds of volunteers. The next day, they even brought in Green Berets who were training nearby. I'd never seen anything like it, a massive human chain combing through every inch of wilderness. The search went on for days. They had helicopters, tracking dogs, even psychics showed up claiming they could help. My family stayed at a nearby motel, and every morning we'd join the search. The adults barely slept. Dennis's mom couldn't stop crying. His dad just stared at maps, plotting new areas to search. On the 4th day, something disturbing happened that the authorities tried to keep quiet, but word spread among the volunteers. A family camping about 4 miles away had heard something terrifying the afternoon Dennis disappeared. The father, a guy named Harold Key, said his family heard this sickening scream, not like a child playing, but something primal and wrong. It came from the woods, lasted maybe 10 seconds, then stopped. But here's the part that still gives me nightmares. Key's family saw something else. Through the trees, they glimpsed a rough-looking man moving quickly uphill. He wasn't dressed like a hiker, more like someone who'd been living in the woods for years. Torn clothes, wild hair, moving with purpose. And he was carrying something over his shoulder, something wrapped in fabric, something about the size of a small child. The rangers questioned Key for hours. They searched that entire area but found nothing. No tracks, no scraps of red shirt, no sign of Dennis. Some volunteers whispered about wild mountain men who supposedly lived deep in the park, completely off the grid. Others mentioned old Cherokee legends about things in these mountains that could snatch children. The rational folks insisted it was a bear, or that Dennis had fallen into one of the hidden sinkholes that dotted the area. They searched for 2 weeks straight. The FBI got involved. They drained streams, rappelled down cliffs, crawled through caves. Nothing. Not a single trace of Dennis, except for one thing that might have been nothing: a child's shoe print going uphill, away from where he was last seen. But it could have been from any kid. My family never talked about what happened after we got home. My parents forbid us from camping for years. My uncle's family moved to Florida 6 months later, said they couldn't stand being near mountains anymore. The last time I saw Dennis's parents, they looked like ghosts of themselves. I went back once, 15 years later, stood at Spence Field and tried to make sense of it. The rhododendron bushes were still there, taller now. The trail where searchers wore a path into the mountain had grown over. It looked peaceful, beautiful even. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the mountains were keeping secrets. The rational part of me wants to believe Dennis got lost, that nature simply swallowed him up like it has so many others. But sometimes I think about Harold Key's story, about that wild man carrying something through the woods, about how vast and dark those mountains really are, and what might be living in places where no trails go. They still list Dennis Martin as missing. Every few years, someone claims they've found evidence or has a new theory. But the truth is, Those mountains took a 6-year-old boy on Father's Day, 1969, and they're never giving him back. And somewhere in those endless ridges and hidden hollows, there might be answers that we're better off not knowing. That's why I don't hike anymore. Not in the Smokies, not anywhere. Because once you've seen how quickly the wilderness can make someone disappear, how completely it can erase a person, you realize we're all just visitors in places that were never meant for us.